Year after year, Hannah cried in silence. While others celebrated children, she carried only pain. But one desperate prayer would change her life forever. The sun slowly disappeared behind the hills of ancient Israel. Families gathered together, children laughed near the tents, and songs of thanksgiving echoed softly through the evening air. Far away from the joy around her, Hannah sat quietly beneath an olive tree, her eyes filled with tears she tried so hard to hide. Year after year, she made this journey to Shiloh. Beside her walked Elkanah, her husband. He loved Hannah deeply and tried everything he could to comfort her. Yet there are some pains so deep that human words cannot heal them. As the family gathered for the sacrifice before the Lord, Elkanah gave Hannah a special portion because of his love for her. But Hannah could barely touch the food before her. Across the gathering, Peninnah watched her carefully. Peninnah had children, and each year she used Hannah's sorrow to hurt her even more. Cruel words slipped from her mouth like sharp knives. "Perhaps the Lord has forgotten you." Hannah lowered her eyes immediately, trying to hide the tears forming again. The joyful sounds around her slowly faded beneath the weight of her sadness. Soon, she could no longer hold the pain inside. Quietly, Hannah stood up and walked away from the gathering. The evening air had grown colder now. The golden light of the temple flickered softly against the darkening sky. Step by step, Hannah moved toward the house of the Lord. Her breathing trembled, her eyes filled with tears, and when she finally reached the temple, she fell to her knees before God. No audience, no performance, no pride, just a broken woman pouring out her soul. Her lips moved silently as tears rolled down onto the stone floor. "Lord of hosts," she whispered softly, "if you will only look upon my suffering, if you remember me." Her voice broke beneath the weight of years of sorrow. Nearby, the old priest Eli watched her from a distance. He noticed her shaking shoulders, her trembling lips, her silent cries. At first, he misunderstood what he saw, but Hannah lifted her tearful face and answered gently, "No, my lord. I am a woman deeply troubled. I have poured out my soul before the Lord." The temple grew still, and in that sacred moment, something began to change. Eli looked carefully at Hannah as tears continued falling from her eyes. For years, she had carried this sorrow alone. For years, she had prayed in silence. But now her pain stood openly before God. The old priest's expression softened. He realized this was not the cry of a drunken woman. This was the cry of a broken heart. And Eli answered and said, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him." 1 Samuel 1:17. Eli lifted his hand gently toward Hannah. "Go in peace," he said softly, "and may the God of Israel grant the request you have asked of him." For a moment, Hannah stood completely still. Those words entered her heart like light breaking through darkness. Nothing around her had changed yet. She still had no child. She still carried years of disappointment. But somehow, hope had returned. For the first time in a long time, Hannah felt peace rise quietly inside her soul. She bowed respectfully before Eli and whispered, "Let your servant find favor in your sight." Then Hannah slowly turned and walked away from the temple. But this time, her steps felt lighter. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. 1 Samuel 1:18. The next morning, the sun rose gently over the hills of Shiloh. The air felt calm and fresh after the long night. Hannah walked beside Elkanah quietly as the family prepared to return home. But something was different now. The sadness that once weighed heavily on her face had begun to fade. For the first time in many years, peace filled her heart, not because she had already seen the miracle, but because she believed God had heard her prayer. Before leaving, Elkanah and his family worshipped once more before the Lord. Then they began the long journey back to Ramah. The road stretched across the dry hills and valleys of Israel as the morning light covered the land in gold. And though Hannah did not know how or when God would answer, heaven was already moving. And they rose up in the morning early and worshipped before the Lord, and returned and came to their house to Ramah. 1 Samuel 1:19. Days passed quietly. Then one day, the Lord remembered Hannah. The prayer she cried through tears in the temple had reached heaven, and God answered her. Bible verse, and the Lord remembered her. 1 Samuel 1:19. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks slowly became months. Then, one quiet morning, Hannah placed her hand gently over her stomach and stopped walking. A feeling she had never known before filled her heart. Hope. Tears gathered in her eyes as she realized God had answered her prayer. The same woman who once wept bitterly before the temple now carried the miracle she had cried out for in the night. Heaven had not ignored her pain. God had been listening all along. Inside their home in Ramah, joy slowly replaced years of sorrow. Elkanah watched Hannah with thankful eyes as her smile returned again. And as the months passed, the child inside her continued to grow. Every morning, Hannah remembered the promise she had made before the Lord. If God gave her a son, she would dedicate him back to him. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come, about after Hannah had conceived, that she bare a son. 1 Samuel 1:20. Then, finally, the day arrived. The cries of a newborn baby filled the house. Hannah held the child close against her chest as tears rolled down her face. After years of waiting, after years of pain, she finally held her miracle in her arms, and she called his name Samuel, because, she said, I asked him of the Lord, and called his name Samuel, saying, because I have asked him of the Lord. 1 Samuel 1:20.